The gift box sat in the center of the dining table, wrapped in glossy silver paper and tied with a navy blue ribbon. My son's handwriting, bold and deliberate, stretched across the card. Happy Father's Day, Dad. I just stood there, staring at it. The late afternoon sun poured through the kitchen window, catching on the ribbon's sheen. Outside, the lawnmower across the street hummed lazily. But in here, the silence felt too still, like the air just before a summer storm. For years, I'd imagined Father's Day as a time of warmth. Homemade cards from when he was little, messy breakfasts in bed, the sound of him giggling in the hallway. This year was different. There had been weeks of clipped conversations, missed calls, and that faint, unshakable sense that I'd been quietly pushed to the edges of his life. I reached for the box, feeling the cool, crisp texture of the wrapping paper under my fingertips. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be, the knuckles worn and swollen from decades of carpentry work. I slid my thumb under the tape, trying not to rip the paper, old habits from a time when every gift felt precious. The ribbon came loose, the paper folded back, and the lid lifted with a faint sigh of cardboard. Inside, nestled in white tissue, was a key. A single gleaming house key on a plain metal ring. No note explaining it, no hint of what door it belonged to. My son Daniel leaned against the doorway, his expression unreadable. His wife Claire stood just behind him, her arms crossed tightly, lips pressed in a faint smug smile. Go ahead, Dad, Daniel said, his voice calm but carrying something else underneath, something colder. It's the key to your new place. The room suddenly felt smaller. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. Claire's voice slid into the space between us. It's closer to the assisted living facilities. Thought it would be easier for you. Less space to take care of. My gaze flicked toward the kitchen cabinets, the ones I'd installed myself when Daniel was still in high school. The faint scent of varnish still lingered if you stood close enough. I thought about the oak dining table I'd built from scratch, the one now covered in gift-wrap scraps, sitting in the home I had paid for, maintained, and poured my life into. Daniel shifted his weight, looking anywhere but my face. We've already started moving some of your things. The world around me blurred for a moment. My own son, my only child, giving me a key to somewhere else, somewhere I hadn't chosen. And in that instant, with the late sunlight catching the polished silver of the key, I knew this wasn't a gift. This was an eviction. When Daniel was born, I was 32 and terrified. His tiny cries in the hospital room felt like both a challenge and a promise. I remember holding him for the first time, his fingers curling around mine, so small, so impossibly light, and thinking, this is it. My life isn't about me anymore. Back then, I worked at the lumber mill by day and took side carpentry jobs at night. I wasn't rich, but I could build things, cradles, cabinets, whole kitchens, and every nail I drove was for him and his mother. When he was 6, I built him a treehouse in the backyard. It wasn't some prefabricated thing from a store. It had a trapdoor, windows with shutters, and a little balcony where we'd sit in summer drinking lemonade. His mom made. I remember him running up the ladder, laughing so hard he nearly fell, shouting, "This is better than Disneyland, Dad." I lived for those moments. Even after his mother left, packing her car one March afternoon without a word to me, I stayed. I worked harder, took every overtime shift offered, made sure Daniel had everything he needed. I never missed a parent-teacher meeting, a school concert, or a single birthday. But things began to shift when Claire came into the picture. It's not that I disliked her at first. She was polite, even warm, in those early months. But as their relationship grew, subtle changes crept in. Daniel started canceling our fishing trips, saying they had plans. He stopped calling me Dad in public, just my father. When they bought their first house, I was there every weekend, installing shelves, fixing leaky faucets, mowing the lawn. I'd bring my own tools, my own paint, my own time. I never sent them a bill, not even for materials. They'd smile, thank me, maybe buy me lunch. But over the years, the thanks felt more like an obligation than gratitude. 3 years ago, after their second child was born, they asked if I'd consider moving in with them temporarily to help out. Claire's tone made it sound like I'd be doing them a favor, and I believed it. I sold my old place, put the money into their mortgage, and settled into the small guest room at the back of the house. I told myself it was practical. I told myself it was family. At first it worked. I cooked dinners, fixed what broke, picked up the kids from school. I was part of their daily life again, and I loved it. But slowly I noticed my name fading from things. Mail addressed only to them. My belongings stored in the garage, decisions about the house made without asking me. Then there were the whispers I'd overhear Claire's voice in the kitchen, saying things like, "It's not sustainable having him here forever," or "We could really use that room for an office." Daniel never argued. 2 weeks before Father's Day, I came home from the grocery store to find a realtor's brochure on the counter. A neat red circle marked a small, single-story apartment complex near the edge of town. My name wasn't on the brochure, but I knew. That night, Daniel avoided my eyes over dinner. Claire smiled too much, asked too many polite questions, the kind people use when they're hiding something. I tried to push the thought away. I told myself they wouldn't do that. Not after everything. And then today happened. The silver key still sat in my palm when Daniel cleared his throat. "It's all set up for you. We've already paid the first month's rent. You'll be comfortable there." Comfortable. The word echoed in my head, twisting until it sounded like contained. I looked around the kitchen one more time, the same kitchen where I'd made Daniel's school lunches, where I'd taught him how to measure flour for pancakes, where I'd sat with him late into the night helping with his science projects. Every memory seemed to be packed up, boxed away, erased. In that moment, the sting of betrayal wasn't just about being asked to leave. It was about realizing I'd been slowly erased from the very life I'd built for him. And if they thought I would just take that key and disappear quietly, they didn't know me at all. Daniel slid into one of the kitchen chairs, his gaze fixed on the key in my hand. "It's better this way, Dad. You'll have your own space. More privacy." Privacy, another word dressed up to hide its real meaning. Distance, isolation, removal. I set the key down on the table, the metal clicking sharply against the wood I'd refinished myself just last year. That sound seemed to echo longer than it should have. Claire stepped forward, her voice soft but practiced, like she'd rehearsed this. "We've even moved some of your essentials already. Clothes, toiletries, a few keepsakes, the rest, we can help you sort through later." Sort through later, as in, decide what part of my life fit into their vision and what didn't. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Not yet. Instead, I studied their faces, memorizing the way Daniel avoided eye contact and the faint gleam of relief in Claire's eyes. They thought this was over, that they'd done the hard part, and I'd just comply. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under my weight. "When do you expect me to move?" Daniel hesitated. "By next weekend would be best. Gives us time to transition the room." Transition. Another word that sounded clean but reeked of entitlement. I nodded slowly, as if absorbing their logic, but inside, something ancient and unyielding was waking up. The same grit that had kept me going through layoffs, sleepless nights, and raising a son alone was now hardening into something sharper. "You've made up your minds," I said quietly. "I guess there's not much for me to say." Relief flickered across Daniel's face, and Claire almost smiled. "Exactly, we just want what's best for everyone." I pushed the key toward them, watching it spin once before coming to rest in front of Claire. "Hold on to it for me. I wouldn't want to lose it." Her hand hovered, then closed around the metal. I stood, the chair scraping the floor. "I'm going to take a walk, clear my head." Daniel opened his mouth as if to say something, but I was already moving toward the back door. The late afternoon air was warm, heavy with the scent of cut grass, and the faint tang of gasoline from the mower next door. I walked to the edge of the yard, past the garden I'd planted with my own hands, past the shed I'd repaired last winter when the roof started leaking. Every board, every nail, every blade of grass on this property had my fingerprints on it. They thought they were pushing me out, but what they didn't realize was that in every corner of this place, I'd left pieces of myself and pieces I could still take back. As I reached the sidewalk, my mind was no longer clouded with shock. It was clear, focused. I wouldn't just leave. No, if they wanted me gone, I'd give them exactly what they asked for. But when I walked away, I'd make sure they finally understood what it meant to lose something they took for granted. And it would start tonight. That night, I lay in the narrow bed at the back of the house, the same one where I'd read bedtime stories to my grandchildren, and stared at the ceiling. The shadows from the hallway light crept along the plaster like slow-moving clouds. I could hear muffled laughter from the living room, the clinking of wine glasses, the low hum of a television. They were celebrating, in their own quiet way. In their minds, this conversation had been handled like mature adults. No shouting, no slammed doors, just a polite exile. Part of me wanted to let it go, to take the small apartment they'd picked, fade quietly into the background, and avoid the strain of fighting people who had already decided I was no longer part of their future. I thought about the path of least resistance, packing up my clothes, labeling boxes, making small talk with the movers, signing the lease they'd no doubt already prepared, smiling through a goodbye lunch I didn't want. It would be easier, less painful. But then, in the stillness, my eyes wandered to the corner of the room where my old tool chest sat, its red paint scratched and dulled from years of use. Inside were the same tools I'd used to build this life, the level that had hung every picture frame, the hammer that had nailed down the floors, the measuring tape that had mapped out the kitchen cabinets. The weight in my chest shifted from sorrow to something harder. They hadn't built this home. I had. I rolled onto my side, my gaze catching the small wooden nightstand beside the bed. Daniel had made it in shop class when he was 15. I'd helped him sand the edges smooth, taught him how to stain it evenly so the wood grain stood out. The drawer stuck now, but it still held a stack of old Father's Day cards, crayon drawings, shaky handwriting, lopsided hearts. One in particular caught my eye. To the best dad in the world, thank you for building everything I love. My throat tightened. Somewhere along the way, that boy had vanished, replaced by a man who spoke in terms like transition and what's best for everyone. I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. My bare feet pressed into the cool hardwood floor I'd installed myself, and a thought settled into place like the last puzzle piece. Walking away without a word would teach them nothing. I wasn't angry in the wild, shouting way. My anger was slow, deliberate, like the steady turn of a wrench tightening a bolt. And I knew that if I left quietly, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. If you've ever built something with your own two hands, a home, a business, a family, you know the weight of watching it slip away. You know the sting when someone you've sacrificed for decides you're no longer useful, no longer part of the picture. So tell me, if you were in my place, holding that silver key like a verdict you never agreed to, what would you do? Would you walk away and let them keep everything you built? Or would you remind them calmly, precisely, that even the strongest walls can come down one nail at a time? Because that's exactly what I was about to do. The next morning, I was up before sunrise. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock in the hallway. I moved quietly, the way you do when you don't want to wake sleeping children, only this time, I wasn't protecting anyone. I was protecting my plan. First stop, the garage. Against the back wall sat my tool chest. I opened the drawers slowly. The familiar squeak of the metal slides, a sound I'd known for decades. My fingers brushed over each tool, hammer, pliers, measuring tape, before selecting the small lockbox at the bottom. Inside were the original receipts, contracts, and invoices from when this house was built. My name was on every page. My money, my sweat, my signature. I tucked the folder under my arm and grabbed the spare set of house keys. My keys, not the silver imposter they'd handed me yesterday. By 6:01 a.m., I was pulling into the parking lot of Johnson and Mark's law offices. The receptionist barely glanced up before recognizing me. "Morning, Mr. Turner, you're early." "I need to see Paul," I said, my voice steady. "It's urgent." Paul Marks had been my lawyer for nearly 20 years. He'd handled the closing on this house, my will, even a dispute with a contractor who'd tried to overcharge me. He was the kind of man who valued records, and I had them in spades. When I laid the folder on his desk, his eyebrows went up. "What's going on, John?" "They're trying to move me out," I said simply. "Daniel and Claire. They've picked out an apartment, started moving my things. But this house," I tapped the folder, "this house is mine. And they've forgotten that." Paul leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Legally, your name is still the only one on the deed?" "Always has been." He opened the folder, flipping through the documents with the quiet efficiency of a man who knew exactly what he was looking for. "Then they can force you out. And if they've already moved your property without permission," he looked up, "that's trespassing." I didn't smile. "Not yet. I don't want to just stop them. I want them to understand exactly what happens when you take someone for granted." Paul studied me for a long moment. "All right, we'll make sure you have the legal ground. But John, whatever you're planning, keep it clean. You want the high ground when this is over." I nodded, though in my mind I was already 2 steps ahead. By the time I left his office, the sun was climbing higher, casting sharp shadows across the sidewalks. I drove straight to the bank where I still held a small but steady portfolio of investments, assets Daniel and Claire didn't know about. I signed a few papers, moved a few numbers, and just like that, the automatic payments I'd been making toward their bills were gone. No more covering the property tax, no more slipping cash into their accounts for emergencies. The first tremor in their perfect little world had just been set in motion. Back at the house, I slipped in through the back door. Daniel was at work. Claire still upstairs with the kids. I moved through the rooms quietly, checking each piece of furniture I'd built, each fixture I'd installed. Anything that was mine, truly mine, went on my mental inventory list. It wasn't just about taking things back. It was about reminding them of the truth. This house didn't become a home without me, and it wouldn't stay one without me either. By the time Claire came downstairs, hair still damp from her shower, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, the morning paper open in front of me. She smiled faintly, like yesterday's conversation had been a minor inconvenience we'd both agreed to forget. I just sipped my coffee and thought, tomorrow you'll start to notice the missing pieces. The first ripple came 2 days later. I was in the living room, tightening a loose hinge on the cabinet door, when Claire's voice cut through the quiet. John? Her tone was polite, but there was an edge, like the moment a teacup starts to rattle before it tips over. I set down the screwdriver and turned. She stood in the doorway, holding a stack of mail. This says the property tax payment didn't go through, she said, shaking an envelope from the county office. It's probably just a mix-up, right? I wiped my hands on a rag and took the letter, scanning the bold print. Payment declined. Account inactive. Not a mix-up, I said evenly. I stopped paying it. Her eyebrows knit together. But Daniel said you'd been covering that since... I interrupted. Now I'm not. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she stood there for a long second, studying me like she'd just realized the family dog had teeth. That night, when Daniel came home, the two of them retreated to the kitchen. Their voices were low, but the tension carried through the walls. Told you we shouldn't have rushed, Claire's voice. He's bluffing. I'll talk to him, Daniels. They didn't know I could hear every word. The next blow landed the following morning. Daniel stomped into the garage in his work clothes, frustration radiating off him. Why is the water heater off? I looked up from the small workbench where I was repairing a picture frame. Because I turned it off. You can't just... I can, I said, my voice calm but sharp. The account's in my name. So is the gas bill. You'll get hot water back when you put it in yours. His jaw clenched, the muscles twitching. We have kids, Dad. I know, I said, meeting his gaze, and kids should learn early that hot water isn't a right. It's a responsibility. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he muttered something under his breath and stalked back into the house. By the end of the week, the tremors were shaking more than their comfort. The insurance company called both cars on my policy had been removed. Their premiums had tripled overnight. Claire spent the afternoon on the phone, her voice climbing with every call. I could feel the temperature in the house change. The air was heavier, the politeness thinner. Meals became quieter, eye contact shorter. The kids picked up on it too, whispering more, asking me in hushed voices why Mommy and Daddy seemed mad all the time. It wasn't just about the bills anymore. It was the growing realization on their part that their safety net wasn't theirs. It had been mine all along, and I just cut it loose. Late one night, I heard Daniel pacing in the kitchen. The fridge door opened, closed, opened again. Finally, his voice, low but sharp, "We have to get him out sooner. This is going to wreck us." I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, letting the words settle. Good. Let them feel the cracks before the walls come down. By the time morning came, I decided on my next step. If the legal documents in my folder were the first strike and the financial cuts were the second, the third would be personal removing, piece by piece, the work they took for granted. That oak dining table where they hosted their friends, mine. The backyard shed where Daniel stored his power tools, built by me. The custom shelving in the den, my design, my labor, my wood. If they wanted me gone, they'd soon learn what the house looked like without my hands in it. It happened on a Saturday morning. Daniel had taken the kids to soccer practice, and Claire was upstairs, probably scrolling through her phone with a cup of coffee she didn't brew herself. The house was quiet, too quiet for what I was about to do. I started in the dining room. The oak table sat in the center, polished to a shine. I ran my fingers along the smooth edge, remembering the hours I'd spent shaping it in my workshop years ago. Each curve, each join, each coat of varnish had been done with the intention that it would outlast me. Now, it wouldn't outlast the week. I dismantled it piece by piece, loosening the bolts, wrapping each section in moving blankets I'd kept from my old house. By the time Claire came downstairs, the dining room was empty except for the light fixture swaying faintly overhead. She stopped in the doorway, her mouth opening and closing like she'd forgotten how words worked. "What? Where's the table?" "In storage," I said, lifting another chair and sliding it into the truck bed waiting outside. "You can't just take..." I can, I interrupted, my tone flat. It's mine. Built it myself before you even met Daniel. Not a dime of yours in it. Her voice trembled, a mixture of anger and disbelief. The kids eat dinner there. They can eat anywhere they like, I said, stepping past her with the last chair. A kitchen counter works fine. I didn't wait for a response. Next was the den. The custom shelving I'd built to fit wall to wall came down with a few turns of a screwdriver. Every screw, every bracket went into a labeled box. The shed in the backyard followed half of it anyway. The portion I'd added on for extra storage came apart under my hands, the wooden panels stacked neatly in the truck. By midday, the house looked lighter, but not in a good way. Bare patches on the walls, hollow corners where furniture had once been, gaps that told a story without words. Daniel returned just as I was tying down the last load. His face went pale when he saw the empty dining room. What the hell, Dad? I closed the tailgate, met his eyes. You said you wanted me out. I'm taking what's mine. That's not what we meant. It's exactly what you meant, I cut in. You don't get to decide which parts of me stay behind when I leave. For a moment, he looked like the boy I used to know, wide-eyed, caught between defiance and guilt. But then his jaw set, and he shook his head. Fine, go. Just don't come back. I stepped into the truck, the engine rumbling to life. Don't worry, I said, staring straight ahead. When I'm done, you won't recognize the place enough to invite me back. As I pulled away, I knew there was no repairing this. The bridge wasn't just burned, it was reduced to ash. And that was exactly how I wanted it. 3 days passed without a word. I half expected angry calls, maybe a letter from some lawyer friend of theirs, but instead the silence stretched until it broke on a Wednesday evening. My phone buzzed while I was in the garage, organizing the salvage pieces of my work. Daniel's name lit up the screen. I let it ring once, twice, before answering. Dad, he said, his voice softer than I'd heard in months. Can we talk? I kept my tone neutral. We are talking. I mean, in person. Come by the house tomorrow. We can have dinner. Just the family. For a second, I imagined the kitchen lit warmly, the kids running to hug me, plates of food on the counter, a scene that might have existed years ago. But I knew better now. Scenes like that were just set pieces they pulled out when it suited them. What's this about? I asked. There was a pause. Claire and I, we might have handled things wrong. Maybe we rushed you. We want to make things right. Make things right. I almost laughed. That phrase was the equivalent of patching a cracked wall with duct tape. Still, I went. Not because I believed them, but because I wanted to see their faces when they realized the rules had changed. The next evening, I pulled into the driveway. The porch light was on, and the dining room curtains were drawn, but I could see shadows moving inside. When I stepped in, the kids were at the table, coloring. Claire offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hi, John. We made roast chicken. Your favorite. I nodded, took a seat. We made small talk, the kind where everyone pretends nothing happened. Daniel asked about my projects. Claire complimented my jacket. It was almost convincing, almost. Then, midway through the meal, Daniel cleared his throat. Listen, about the apartment. We were thinking maybe you could stay here until the end of the year. No rush. And there it was, the hook hidden under the bait. I set my fork down. Why the sudden change? Claire's smile faltered. We just think it's better for everyone if we ease into things. Translation. They needed me. Maybe the bills had started piling up. Maybe the missing furniture had made the place feel more like an empty rental than a family home. Whatever the reason, it wasn't love, it was necessity. I leaned back, studying them. I appreciate the offer, I said slowly, but I've already made other plans. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What kind of plans? The kind that don't involve being somewhere I'm not wanted, I said, my voice steady. Claire's mouth opened as if to argue, but I stood, placing my napkin neatly on the table. Dinner was good, but let's not pretend this fixes anything. I left without dessert, the cool night air sharp against my face. For them, this was a truce. For me, it was proof that they were already feeling the cracks, and I hadn't even shown them the full damage yet. 2 days after that awkward dinner, I got a letter in the mail. Not a bill, not junk. This one was thick, official, with the county seal stamped in blue ink. At first, I thought it might be a notice about the property tax I'd stopped paying. But when I opened it, my eyes landed on the header. Proposed zoning change, public hearing notification. The map inside showed my neighborhood, and a bold red outline around Daniel's property. My property. According to the notice, the county was considering rezoning the area for commercial use, which meant that if it passed, The value of the house could skyrocket or tank, depending on how the owners handled it. I read it twice, then a third time, and then I saw it, a line stating that only the registered property owner had the right to file an appeal or negotiate with developers. That was me, only me. The timing was perfect. If Daniel and Claire had been planning to transition me out before, now they had another reason to control what happened to the house if the zoning changed. But the law was clear. Without my signature, nothing moved forward. I called Paul, my lawyer. He confirmed what I already suspected. "John, this gives you leverage," he said. "Serious leverage. Developers will pay a premium for owner cooperation, and right now you're the only one at the table." I could almost hear the gears turning in my head. I didn't just have a way to protect my position. I had a way to make them realize how deeply they'd underestimated me. That evening, I drove by the house. The curtains were open, and through the window, I saw Claire at the kitchen counter. Laptop open, papers spread out. Daniel was pacing, phone to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply. They already knew. Sure enough, my phone rang the next morning. Daniel's voice was too bright, too rehearsed. "Hey, Dad, heard about the zoning thing? Crazy timing, huh? Listen, we should probably all sit down and coordinate." "Coordinate," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Yeah, make sure we're on the same page. Developers might reach out, and we want to show a united front." I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then I said, "United fronts are for united families, Daniel. We're not quite there, are we?" He stumbled over his next words. "Look, it's important that we handle this right." "I agree," I said, "which is why I'll be handling it myself." The pause on the other end was delicious. "Dad, you can't." "I can," I cut in. "Just like I could take my table, my shelves, my shed. This house and what happens to it is mine to decide. You made sure of that when you told me to leave." I hung up before he could answer, a slow smile spreading across my face. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't just reacting. I was in control. Have you ever been pushed so far out of a place you built that you almost forgot it was yours? That's where I was, until one piece of mail reminded me that the title, the deed, the rights, all still had my name on them. Now tell me, if you were holding the single key to a decision worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the very people who tried to push you out suddenly needed you, would you forgive them? Or would you make them feel every ounce of the cold they'd shown you? Because I already knew my answer. The public hearing was held in the county municipal building, in a long, wood-paneled room that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. Rows of chairs faced a raised platform where the zoning board sat, flanked by microphones and stacks of files. I'd arrived early, taking a seat in the front row. The folder with the property deed rested on my lap, the county seal gleaming in the morning light that streamed through tall windows. 5 minutes before the meeting began, Daniel and Claire walked in. Claire wore a blazer too formal for the occasion. Daniel had the tight smile of a man trying to look calm while his stomach burned. They spotted me instantly. Claire's heels clicked as they approached. "Dad, we didn't know you were coming," she said, her voice sweet enough to give a dentist nightmares. I didn't stand. "You should have assumed I would." Daniel cleared his throat. "Listen, we're all here for the same thing, making sure the property value is protected. So let's agree." The board chair called the meeting to order before he could finish. The first developer presented his proposal: convert several residential lots, including mine, into a boutique retail strip. His offer included relocation stipends for residents willing to sell early. I listened, expression neutral. When the chair opened the floor for public comment, Daniel started to rise, only for me to stand first. "John Turner," I said into the microphone, "owner of 1428 Westfield Lane. Sole owner, according to the deed filed on May 12, 15 years ago." A murmur ran through the room. I saw Daniel's shoulders stiffen, Claire's eyes narrow. I continued, voice steady but carrying to every corner of the room. "I've reviewed the proposals. I've considered the offers, and I will not be selling. Not now, not later. I've built that property with my own hands, and no developer, however well dressed, will decide its future without my say." The chair nodded, making a note. "Your statement is on record, Mr. Turner." I stepped away from the microphone, but not before glancing at Daniel. His face was pale, his jaw tight. Claire whispered something sharp in his ear. The second developer tried to counter, offering even more money, promising to preserve the character of the neighborhood. When it was my turn again, I leaned in close to the microphone. I appreciate the interest, but the character of the neighborhood is already preserved in the work I've done, in the home I've maintained, and in the life I've built there. That won't change just because someone waves a check in my face. From my seat, I could feel Daniel's frustration radiating. The leverage was mine, and now it was on public record for everyone to see. When the meeting adjourned, people gathered their things. Daniel lingered, but I didn't wait for him to speak. I walked out into the crisp afternoon air, my boots solid on the pavement. I'd just told an entire room of officials, developers, and my own son, this house is mine, and my voice decides its fate. And that was only the first half of the lesson. As the crowd trickled out of the municipal building, I walked toward the steps, feeling the afternoon sun warm the back of my neck. The sound of hurried footsteps followed. Daniel and Claire. "Dad, wait," Daniel said, his voice tight. I stopped at the bottom of the steps, turning just enough to see their faces. Claire's polite mask was gone, replaced by raw irritation. "You made us look ridiculous in there," she snapped. I tilted my head. "No, Claire. I made sure everyone in that room knew who this house belongs to. If that embarrasses you, maybe you should think about why." Daniel stepped forward, lowering his voice as if he could hide the desperation from the strangers walking past. "Look, we can still work something out. If you just agree to the developer's terms, we could all—" I cut him off. "We? You mean you wanted me gone, Daniel, remember? Now you want me to sign so you can cash out? That's not how this works." Claire crossed her arms. "You're being selfish." That word made me laugh. An actual laugh that caught a few passers-by's attention. "Selfish? After I paid your bills, fixed your home, and gave you a place to live? No, Claire. This is me finally being fair to myself." Daniel's jaw clenched. "So you're just going to hold the property hostage?" I leaned in slightly, my voice low but firm. "Not hostage, protected, the way it should have been all along." At that moment, a man in a tailored suit approached. He was one of the developers from the meeting, and he carried a sleek black folder. "Mr. Turner, I just wanted to say, if you ever change your mind, our firm would be willing to negotiate exclusively with you. We can offer a very generous package." He glanced at Daniel and Claire, then back at me. "But only you. The deed is clear on that." Daniel's ears flushed crimson. Claire's lips pressed into a hard line. I smiled, shaking the man's hand. "I'll keep that in mind, but for now, I'm not selling." The developer nodded and left, his words hanging in the air like a closing curtain. I turned back to Daniel and Claire. "Do you see it now, the difference between being part of a home and just living in a house?" Daniel didn't answer. Claire looked away. I started down the sidewalk, not bothering to look back. Behind me, I could hear them arguing in hushed but frantic tones, their voices swallowed by the city noise. They had wanted to control me. Now, in front of witnesses, they'd learned the truth. They couldn't make a single decision about the future without me. And the best part, that was entirely their doing. In the weeks after the hearing, the shift in Daniel and Claire's behavior was almost comical. The same people who had spoken in careful, measured tones about transitioning me out were now overcompensating, offering me coffee in the mornings, asking if I needed anything from the store, even inviting me to join family outings. I didn't fall for it. This wasn't reconciliation, it was damage control. They were trying to keep me close, to keep me pliable, until the zoning situation resolved in their favor. But I had my own plan. Through Paul, I quietly filed a deed restriction with the county, a legally binding clause stating that the property could not be sold, transferred, or redeveloped without my express written consent. It didn't matter if the zoning changed to gold mines and beachfront property, my signature was the only key. Paul called me after it was finalized. "It's ironclad, John. No one can touch that house without you." That night I sat in the living room, sipping tea from my favorite mug, while Daniel flipped through TV channels and Claire scrolled on her phone. They didn't know yet. I waited. The reveal came a week later, when a developer's assistant called the house directly, asking for Mr. Turner to sign a preliminary agreement. Claire answered, her voice bright at first until the assistant clarified. "No, not Daniel Turner, John Turner, the sole property owner." The color drained from her face. Daniel came into the room halfway through the call, confusion turning to frustration as she handed him the phone. By the time he hung up, his expression was a mix of disbelief and resignation. You put something on the deed?" "Yes," I said, not looking up from my newspaper. "It's called a restriction. Means the property stays exactly as it is, unless I say otherwise." Claire's voice rose. "You had no right." I set the paper down and met her eyes. I had every right. I've always had the right. You just assumed I wouldn't use it. Silence settled over the room. The kids' laughter from upstairs felt like it belonged to a different world entirely. From that day on, the tension in the house shifted. They still tried to mask their frustration, but there was an underlying acceptance now, a quiet acknowledgement that their control over me and over this house was gone. I didn't flaunt my victory. I didn't need to. The beauty of it was in the permanence. On Sundays, I'd sit on the porch with my coffee, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes down the street. Sometimes Daniel would join me, his words awkward but less guarded than before. Claire mostly kept her distance. I didn't mind. This wasn't about punishing them forever. It was about ensuring they never forgot that a home isn't just walls and a roof. It's the history built into it, the sweat poured into its foundation, and the respect owed to the person who made it possible. And now, every time they looked at this house, they'd remember it wasn't theirs to take. It never had been. The first real autumn chill rolled in a month later, bringing with it the crisp scent of dry leaves and the faint smoke of fireplaces waking from their summer rest. I sat on the porch, wrapped in my old flannel jacket, watching the maple tree in the front yard trade its green for fire red. It had been years since I'd sat out here without feeling like a guest. Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. He got out slowly, not rushing into the house like he used to. Instead, he came up the porch steps, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on the boards beneath his feet. "Need a hand with anything?" he asked. The words cautious, like a kid testing the water before jumping in. "No," I said, but without the bite I might have had before. Just enjoying the view. He nodded, then sat in the chair beside me. For a while we just listened to the rustle of leaves and the distant barking of a dog. "I didn't realize," he started, then stopped. "I didn't think about how much of you is in this place." I didn't answer right away. That was the thing about words. They're cheap unless the person saying them has felt the weight of what they mean. Finally, I said, "A house isn't just built once, Daniel. You keep building it every day you live there. The minute you stop valuing that, you start losing it." He nodded, staring out at the street. I didn't press him. Lessons like this sink in slow. Inside, I could hear Claire moving around the kitchen. She didn't come out to join us, but she didn't need to. Her absence was part of the balance we'd found. Not warm, not hostile, just coexistence. That was enough for me. Over the next weeks, I started reclaiming small joys, morning walks, without rushing back to fix something for them. Afternoons in my workshop restoring furniture for neighbors, evenings on the porch with a good book. I wasn't just defending my place in this house anymore. I was living in it again. I also started setting boundaries I'd never thought to set before. My name wasn't just on the deed. It was on every decision about repairs, changes, and even who stayed here overnight. I didn't wield that power like a weapon, but I made sure it was respected. And here's the thing. Once they realized they couldn't take from me what I wasn't offering freely, the tension eased. No more whispered plans. No more subtle pushes toward the door. One Sunday afternoon, my granddaughter came running into the workshop, holding a crayon drawing. "Grandpa, I made this for you. It's our house." I took it from her, studying the crooked lines and bright colors. The house she'd drawn had a porch, a big tree in the yard, and 3 stick figures standing out front. I recognized myself immediately, the one in the middle, taller than the rest, with a wide, uneven smile. I felt something loosen in my chest. This was why I'd fought. Not for control, not for revenge alone, but so that the people who came after me would understand that some things are worth protecting, not because they're perfect, but because they're yours. I hung her picture on the wall above my workbench. The leaves kept falling, the air kept cooling, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't just surviving in my own home. I was rooted here again. And roots, once set deep, aren't easy to pull up. Some people think revenge is about destroying what someone else has. But the best revenge? It's protecting what's yours so completely that no one can ever take it again. Daniel and Claire wanted me gone. They wanted my home, my work, my history without me in it. Now every time they walk through those doors, they're reminded of a truth they can't change. This house, this life, is still mine. And it will be, until I decide otherwise. So tell me, if someone tried to erase you from the very thing you built with your own hands, would you let them? Or would you, like me, make sure they remember exactly who laid the first brick?